Ladies and gentlemen of the night, welcome back to the shadow behind you, where the forgotten whispers of history claw their way from the grave to remind us that some secrets are better left buried. Tonight, we venture deep into the twisted heart of the American South, to a place where the mountains swallow the sun and spit out nightmares. Picture this. The year is 1877, and the Ozark Mountains loom like silent sentinels over the fledgling town of Fayetteville, Arkansas. The air is thick with the scent of pine resin and damp earth, mingled with the acrid smoke of wood burning stoves. Reconstruction has scarred the land. Former slaves till fields once soaked in Confederate blood, railroads snake through the wilderness like iron veins, and whispers of progress echo against the ancient rocks. But beneath this veneer of renewal lies a rot that festers in the soul of the hills. Fayetteville, named after its Tennessee kin, was a speck on the map when it was incorporated in 1836, a haven for settlers fleeing the old world's woes. By the 1870s, it had grown into a bustling outpost, with the Arkansas Sentinel newspaper chronicling the mundane triumphs of foundries and farms. Yet, the Ozarks have always been a land of dualities, beauty and brutality, life and lingering death. The hills hide hollows where moonlight filters through skeletal branches, casting shadows that seem to move of their own accord. Folklore here isn't mere stories, it's the breath of the land itself. Tales of the Snorfus, that ethereal stag with antlers of blooming dogwood, drifting like mist through the forests, symbolizing purity or peril depending on the teller. Or the Ozark howler, a beast whose cry foretells doom, blending the wails of panthers and the screams of the damned. But our tale tonight isn't about mythical beasts, though they may lurk in the periphery. No, this is the story of the widow's curse, a legend so steeped in flesh and terror that even the hardiest mountaineers shudder at its mention. It begins with a woman named Eliza Hawthorne, a widow whose grief twisted into something unholy. They say her husband, Elias, met a gruesome end at the hands of suspicious townsfolk, accused of consorting with dark forces in the aftermath of the Civil War's chaos. The war had left scars on every soul. Bushwhackers roamed the hills, families were torn asunder, and paranoia festered like an open wound. Elias, a healer versed in herbal lore passed down from Cherokee ancestors who once roamed these lands, was branded a witch. Hanged from an ancient oak on the outskirts of town, his body left to sway as a warning. Eliza, left alone in their cabin perched on the misty slopes overlooking Fayetteville, didn't weep publicly. Instead, she retreated into the shadows, her eyes burning with a fire that chilled those who dared meet her gaze. Whispers spread. She was seen muttering incantations under the full moon, drawing symbols in the dirt with blood from her own veins. And then, one fateful night in the spring of 1877, as thunder rolled over the mountains, she unleashed her curse. Let the flesh of the guilty melt from their bones. She intoned, her voice carried on the wind like a banshee's wail. Let death stalk the valleys, and terror consume the hearts of men. What followed was a plague of horrors that defied explanation. Farmers awoke to find their livestock stripped of skin, still alive and moaning in agony. Townsfolk reported visions of decaying figures shambling through the fog, their bodies twisting in unnatural ways. Children vanished into the woods, only to return with eyes hollowed by unspeakable sights. The curse, they said, fed on the living, turning flesh into a canvas of decay and death. Was it madness? Hallucinations born of guilt and superstition? Or something far more sinister, rooted in the ancient curses of widows scorned? Echoes of Irish folklore transplanted to these rugged hills. As we delve into this tale, feel the chill creep up your spine. The Ozarks are alive with memories, and tonight, those memories hunger for an audience. Listen closely, for in the silence between my words, you might hear the widow's whisper. Is that the wind rustling the leaves outside your window, or something else? Something watching, waiting, just behind you. Her pause for effect, music swells with dissonant notes. But before we plunge into the heart of the narrative, let me paint the scene more vividly. Imagine the town square in Fayetteville, where lamplight flickers against cobblestone streets, casting long shadows that dance like specters. The air is heavy with the aroma of blooming dogwoods and the distant tang of river water from the nearby White River. In 1877, the first foundry belched smoke into the sky, a symbol of industry clashing with the primal wilderness. Railroads were carving paths through the mountains, bringing outsiders and their skeptical ways. But the old-timers knew better. They remembered the war's atrocities, Union troops burning homes, families fleeing into the hollows. Superstition was a shield against the unknown, and Eliza's curse pierced that shield like a dagger. Why does this story grip us so? Because it taps into the primal fear of loss, the widow's grief mirroring our own vulnerabilities. Flesh, death, terror, these are the building blocks of human existence, stripped bare in the Ozarks' unforgiving terrain. As we proceed, remember the past isn't dead, it's merely waiting to be awakened, and tonight we awaken it. Now let us step back into that fateful year 1877, where the veil between the living and the dead grew thin in the shadow of the Ozarks. Fayetteville was a town on the cusp, rebuilt from the ashes of the Civil War, its streets echoing with the clatter of wagons and the ring of hammers from Augustus Volner's new foundry. The air carried the metallic tang of progress, but the mountains whispered of older things, hidden caves where echoes mimicked the cries of lost souls, and fog-shrouded paths where travelers vanished without trace. Our story centers on Eliza Hawthorne, a woman of 35 whose beauty had once turned heads in the town square. Her hair, black as raven feathers, cascaded like a shroud over shoulders bowed by hardship. She and her husband Elias had come to Fayetteville a decade earlier, seeking solace after the war's devastation. Elias, a tall man with hands calloused from tilling rocky soil, was known for his remedies, potions brewed from mountain herbs that cured fevers and mended bones. But in the post-war paranoia, his knowledge smacked of sorcery. He's in league with the devil. The whispers went, fueled by jealous neighbors envious of his fertile land. The Hawthorne's cabin sat on a ridge overlooking the town, surrounded by dense woods where owls hooted omens and streams murmured secrets. Inside, the hearth glowed with a perpetual fire, casting flickering shadows on walls adorned with dried herbs and talismans, relics from Elias's Cherokee grandmother, who had taught him the ways of the land before the Trail of Tears swept her people west. Eliza, of Irish descent, brought her own folklore, tales of banshees and curses, whispered to Elias on stormy nights. It was a crisp autumn evening when trouble brewed. Elias had healed the mayor's son from a rattlesnake bite, using a poultice that drew out the venom like magic. Gratitude turned to suspicion when the boy spoke of visions during his fever, ghostly figures in the woods. Witchcraft, cried the preacher, Reverend Harlan, a fire and brimstone man whose sermons railed against the pagan remnants. In the hills, a mob formed, torches blazing in the twilight, their faces twisted in righteous fury. Eliza heard them coming, the thud of boots on the dirt path like the heartbeat of doom. She begged Elias to flee, but he stood firm, his eyes calm as mountain lakes. "The truth will out," he said, kissing her forehead. But truth was no match for fear. They dragged him to the old oak, its branches gnarled like accusing fingers. The noose tightened, and as life ebbed from him, Elias's last words were a plea, "Forgive them, Eliza. Don't let hate consume you." She watched from the shadows, her screams swallowed by the night. His body swung, creaking in the wind, a macabre pendulum marking the end of her world. The mob dispersed, muttering justifications, but Eliza remained, cutting him down at dawn with trembling hands. She buried him beneath the oak, marking the grave with stones etched in ancient runes. Grief morphed into rage. Days blurred into nights as she wandered the woods, her dress torn, feet bloodied. Locals avoided her, crossing themselves at her approach. Then came the signs milk soared in pitchers, crops withered overnight. The widow's curse, they murmured, recalling old tales from Ireland where a bereaved woman's words could blight the land. One moonlit night, Eliza climbed to the highest peak, where legends spoke of spirits dwelling in the rocks. She slashed her palm, letting blood drip onto the earth, and chanted words blending Cherokee invocations and Celtic spells. By the flesh that binds us, by the death that claims us, let terror reign upon those who took my love. Let their bodies betray them, melting like wax in flame, until justice is served." The wind howled in response, carrying her voice down to Fayetteville. That night, the first victim fell. Farmer Josiah Creed awoke screaming, his skin bubbling as if boiled from within. Blisters formed, bursting with foul pus, revealing raw muscle beneath. He clawed at his arms, flesh sloughing off in sheets, until he collapsed in a heap of agony. Neighbors found him at dawn, barely alive, whispering of a woman's shadow at his window. Panic spread like wildfire. Reverend Harlan preached of demonic possession, urging repentance. But more afflictions came. A young girl, her eyes melting in their sockets. A blacksmith whose bones softened, twisting his limbs into grotesque shapes. The curse targeted the mob's members one by one, their bodies becoming prisons of horror. Eliza vanished into the mountains, but her presence lingered. Sightings reported her as a spectral figure, skin pale as bone, eyes glowing with unearthly fire. The town barricaded doors, but the terror seeped through cracks, a miasma of decay that tainted the air with the stench of rotting flesh. As winter approached, snow blanketed the Ozarks, but no peace came. The curse evolved, summoning visions of the dead. Elias himself, his neck rope, burned, shambling through dreams to accuse the guilty. Flesh, death. Terror, these became the triad haunting Fayetteville, a symphony of suffering orchestrated by a widow's broken heart. As the curse deepened its grip on Fayetteville, the Ozarks transformed into a labyrinth of dread. The mountains, once a refuge, now pulsed with malevolent energy, their hollows echoing with unnatural cries. Eliza Hawthorne, the widow whose sorrow had birthed this nightmare, was no longer merely human. Rumors painted her as a wraith, merging with the land's ancient spirits. By midsummer of 1877, the afflictions escalated. The initial victims' sufferings paled against the new horrors. Take the case of Mayor Thurston, leader of the mob that hanged Elias. He barricaded himself in his grand home on the town square, surrounded by armed guards. But walls meant nothing to the curse. One evening, as he dined alone, his fork pierced not meat, but his own tongue, which had swollen grotesquely, veined with black rot. He gasped, feeling his insides churn, as if insects burrowed through his gut. By morning, his body was a hollow shell, organs liquefied, skin sagging like deflated leather. Scratched into the table were words, "Flesh for flesh." The town descended into chaos. Families fled, wagons laden with belongings rumbling down muddy roads. Those who stayed huddled in churches, Reverend Harlan's voice hoarse from endless prayers. But even he wasn't spared. During a sermon, his hands began to tremble, fingers elongating unnaturally, nails curling into talons. Before the congregation's horrified eyes, his skin peeled back, exposing sinew and bone. "The widow?" he screamed, collapsing in a pool of his own fluids. Eliza's sightings multiplied. Hunters in the woods reported a figure gliding through trees, her dress trailing like fog, leaving trails of withered vegetation. One brave soul, young trapper Caleb Moss, followed her into a cave system riddled with crystals that gleamed like eyes in the dark. Inside, he found altars of bones, arranged in patterns evoking Cherokee medicine wheels fused with Celtic knots. Eliza turned to him, her face a mask of decayed beauty, and whispered, "Join the dance of death." Caleb escaped, but his hair turned white overnight, and his dreams were forever plagued by visions of flayed bodies writhing in eternal torment. The curse spread beyond the guilty, touching innocence in its insatiable hunger. Children played in the fields, only to return with bites that festered into gaping wounds, flesh necrotizing at alarming speed. The river ran red with discarded bandages soaked in pus. Doctors from nearby towns arrived, baffled by the epidemic. Some called it a plague, others possession. But old-timers knew it was the widow's work, drawing on Ozark legends of shape, shifters and skinwalkers, beings that shed flesh like snakes. Desperation birthed a hunt. A posse formed, led by Sheriff Landon, a war veteran with scars from Pea Ridge. They tracked Eliza through storm-lashed trails, lightning illuminating grotesque tableox trees with bark peeled to reveal pulsing veins, animals fused in death throes. Deep in the mountains, they found her cabin ablaze, flames licking the sky like hungry tongues. Inside, Eliza stood unmoved, her eyes reflecting the inferno. The confrontation was cataclysmic. As they advanced, the ground trembled, roots bursting forth to ensnare legs, thorns drawing blood that sizzled on the earth. One man, his arm caught, watched in horror as his flesh dissolved, bones crumbling to dust. Eliza laughed, a sound like cracking ice, and extended her hand. From her palm emanated a wave of decay, wilting the posse's resolve. Sheriff Landon fired, the bullet piercing her chest, but no blood flowed. Only a swarm of black flies that engulfed him, burrowing into his eyes and mouth. Only a few escaped, babbling of the widow's immortality. The curse peaked that night. Fayetteville awoke to screams as bodies contorted, limbs detaching in sprays of gore, faces melting into unrecognizable masks. The air reeked of copper and rot, the streets slick with viscera. Yet, amid the terror, a glimmer of redemption. A young girl, orphaned by the curse, ventured to Elias's grave. Kneeling, she pleaded for mercy, offering tears as atonement. The oak tree shuddered, and a voice echoed, "The debt is paid." Dawn broke, and the horrors ceased. Eliza's form was seen one last time, dissolving into mist, her curse sated. But was it truly over? Whispers persist in the Ozarks, of flesh that itches unnaturally on stormy nights, of shadows that hunger. To understand the widow's curse, we must peel back the layers of history and folklore that cloak the Ozarks like a shroud. The year 1877 marked a pivotal moment in post-Civil War Arkansas, a time of reconstruction and renewal amid lingering wounds. The Civil War had ravaged the state, with battles like Pea Ridge leaving fields littered with the dead and communities fractured. By the 1870s, railroads expanded rapidly, connecting isolated towns like Fayetteville to the wider world, fostering economic growth, but also importing tensions. Fayetteville itself, founded in 1828 on land once inhabited by Osage and Cherokee peoples, embodied this clash of old and new. The arrival of the first foundry in 1877 symbolized industrial ambition, but it disrupted traditional ways, breeding resentment. Culturally, the Ozarks are a cauldron of blended traditions. Settlers from Appalachia, Ireland, and Scotland brought folklore rich in curses and hauntings. The widow's curse draws from Irish Pisces, where a widow's imprecation held potent power due to her marginalized status. In the American South, this merged with Native American legends, Cherokee tales of skinwalkers, shape-shifters who donned animal hides to wreak havoc, echoing the body horror in our story. The Snorfus and Ozark Howler represent the region's mythical bestiary, omens of death tied to the land's purity. Hauntings abound in Fayetteville's lore, Tilly Willie Bridge, where a spectral mother wanders, Ghost Mountain, site of a 1930s tragedy. These echo the widow's tale, blending fact with fear. Southern Gothic elements, decay, vengeance, amplify the terror as seen in legends like Skin Tom or the Witch of Yoizu. This context lends eerie authenticity, suggesting the curse isn't mere fiction, but a manifestation of cultural trauma. Delving deeper, the widow's curse unveils profound symbols and psychological depths. Flesh represents vulnerability. The body's betrayal mirrors grief's erosion of the self. Death is not endpoint but transformation, echoing universal fears of mortality. Terror binds them, a primal response to the unknown. Thematically, it connects to cultural trauma. Post-war guilt manifests as horror, the curse a metaphor for unresolved injustices. Human nature's dark side, mob mentality, superstition, fuels the narrative, reflecting how fear distorts reality. Ominously, it probes the psyche. Eliza's revenge taps into archetypal widow figures, embodying repressed rage. In the Ozarks' isolation, such tales warn of nature's indifference, leaving us haunted by our shadows. As our tale fades into the mist, remember the widow's curse lingers in the Ozarks' whispers. Fayetteville endures, but on quiet nights, do you feel the itch of unseen eyes? The shadow behind you waits. Perhaps it's Eliza, reminding us that some grievances never die. Sleep well if you can.